Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So behind me I got a 2006 Chevy Silverado 2500 heavy duty, and this thing has around, I want to say 40,000 miles on it. And yes, that is really low miles, but this truck behind me itself is just used primarily for snow plowing. So it works a couple months out of the years and then it just basically sits and they drive it here and there. But today we're going to go ahead and replace the inner and outer tie rod on there. The steering's getting a little sloppy, so we're going to go ahead and replace those two items today. But before we go ahead and do so, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. It definitely helps the channel grow. And with that said, let's go ahead and start with the repairs. Alright guys, so the first step in this that you're going to want to do is go ahead and remove the nut that is holding on your tie rod, or at least the outer tie rod. Now in this video I'm going to be doing the inner and the outer, so there's no reason for me to separate the joint here in the middle. If you're only replacing the outer, just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, you're going to unbolt it here and you're going to loosen it here. Now you want to break this bolt free first, make sure it can come off before you loosen it here, otherwise you'll never be able to loosen this. It'll be very difficult. So you would want to separate and break that off right about now before you loosen this up. However, since I'm doing this all in one and I don't want to disturb this, because I'm going to use this inner and outer as a whole piece to try to get the same exact length on my new tie rod for the inner and the outer before I could take it into the alignment shop, because I do have to drive this down to get the alignment. Unfortunately, I don't have an alignment machine here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off. And again, if you are replacing just the outer, guys, go ahead and break this inner jam nut loose first for the outer tie rod. Otherwise, if you're doing it like I am, just remove this one. That's all you're going to need. So I'm going to take my 21 millimeter and go ahead and take this off. Now these, depending on where your truck is located, will fight you or they won't fight you. This one I have had off before, because I did do a wheel bearing on this truck, and this is going to be the other portion. And when I do wheel bearings, I typically remove them. So this thing comes off really easy. It'll probably just fall out right now, but I'm going to take a hammer and go ahead and give it a couple hits here and see if it'll come off, and it does. You may have to put up a little bit more of a fight when you're removing yours, just that this one did come off recently. So now that we went ahead and we got that off, you're left with the inner portion, which is right there, and the outer. Now we're gonna go ahead and take off the inner portion. Let me raise the truck up and give you guys a better angle on that. So now I have you guys zoomed in on the inner tie rod, and I'm going to be using a pretty big adjustable wrench to get this off. They do make crow's foot wrenches and inner outer tie rod tools that you can use for it. However, this I find just works very good. So what I do is I go ahead and set up my wrench so it fits. And what I'm going to do is use a pipe, a cheater pipe here on my wrench, and I'm going to go ahead and break this loose. And once I get this off, I'll show you guys my setup here so you guys aren't a little baffled as to how I'm doing this. But we're going to go ahead and turn it the right way, because I almost went to tighten it there for a second. We're going to go ahead and loosen it up. Now sometimes these will fight you. They will have Loctite on them. Some of them might have like a plastic molded insert to keep them locked into place. So just be mindful of it. And I'll show you guys what I'm actually removing, or where I'm putting my wrench. It's just that it's very confined in here, and it's very difficult to try to show this while it's on the car. But here, I can show you from the other side here. Just kind of give you guys an example. This is the one on the passenger side that I already did. On the inner boot portion, you will see that you have this cutout that can take a wrench, and that's where I'm unscrewing it from, just so you guys aren't curious and wondering that how am I grabbing it from there. These sometimes, like I said, when they're Loctited, they're very difficult to get off. So right now I'm just gonna work it off. It's not very long, but you know, they do take a couple turns. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of this off, and I'll be back once I have it all removed. Alright guys, so I just about have this removed. It's fairly loose, and I'm going to go ahead and take it off. And there's the end, just like what I showed you on the previous clip on the passenger side one that I already removed. That's what you're spinning it off of from. Now once we remove our assembly out of the way, I'm going to show you guys where it bolts up to, because This one is not really like a rack and pinion setup, so this one still uses a gearbox and idlers, and it has this little rod. You can see there's the grease fitting for the nipple there, and this is what we're screwing into. What you want to do here is, if in case the truck had Loctite on there previously, you want to make sure you get all the Loctite out, but also you want to be careful because that is the point of where you grease it. So what I like to do is just take a screwdriver and just kind of work anything out of there. Old Loctite, once it frees up, it usually comes off in like little shrapnel pieces, kind of like little hard plastic bits. So what I like to do is just get in here, and I use some of that old grease that's in there to just kind of scoop it outward and try to get every little bit that I can, because you definitely don't want to have any of the old Loctite on there. It'll make it very difficult for you to thread in. And then what I like to do is go ahead and take a piece of paper and get most of the grease out of the threaded portions, simply because we have to reinstall this using Loctite, and I simply do not want to have any issues when it comes to it not seating correctly because there's grease on there. Now that we have that off and we've prepped the car for our new inner tie rod, let me take you guys to the bench and show you why I do these in one. Now the outer tie rod on this truck isn't necessarily bad, but the inner is the one that's bad, and the outer tie rods have been on here for a while, so the customer just opted to do both while he is getting an alignment. He doesn't want to sit there and take the chance of an inner being replaced and then the outer one goes bad a couple months later and he has to redo this and the truck has to come back in for service. Because the winter months for this truck are always in use, it is a plow, so he doesn't want to have any downtime. So in this case, he's opting for both inner and outers on both sides. So let's go ahead and show you on the bench how I mock these up. So my tool of choice to get the inner tie rod out, guys, is this very big adjustable wrench. It goes up to a 1/2 inch. And this is what I like using to get in there. What I do is I also extend it. I just put a piece of pipe on here to give me a little bit more leverage. So that way you guys can kind of understand what tool I was using. Because they do make some specialty tools. I don't know if they apply to this one, but just this good old adjustable wrench method definitely works. Alright guys, so we have our assemblies on the bench now. This is our old assembly. You guys can see the inner tie rod and then the outer tie rod, the jam nut, it's all right there. The reason why I like doing these on the bench is because I can actually measure this quite easily and get the new one fairly close. Now where I like to begin on these is I got to install the new jam nut. I don't like reusing the old one. And one thing I like to do to help out my alignment people here is I'll put a little bit of grease on the threads before I go ahead and I insert this, simply because most alignment people, they will find a way to complain. If you go take this in for an alignment, and I'm sorry for any of you guys out there that are working at a tire shop and you're doing alignments, but my experience is very horrible with alignment shops. You take in a car that could have brand new suspension and they'll still find a way to tell you, oh, you need something new or this or that. So it really sucks. I try to make it very easy because I took a car in once where this jam nut was kind of difficult to turn because it was new, and they refused to do the alignment, saying that I needed to replace my inner tie rod because the threads were stripped, even though that wasn't the case. All I needed was a little bit of oil. Maybe the guy was just having a bad day, but either way, I try to make it as easy as possible for the alignment people nowadays. So once I run my jam nut in there a good ways, you can see most of the grease has kind of dissipated and gone with the nut. I'll just take and I'll reapply just very light coating, guys. You don't want to go too deep in there. And we're gonna go ahead and insert our outer end in. Now these do take a little bit of time because you are threading quite a bit. And what I like to do is I eyeball it. I'll generally just set up my tie rod end like this, and you can kind of tell how much to thread in. This one just needs a little bit more. And this is very easy because what I do here is I will lay these parts one on top of another just like that. And I am actually fairly close on this one. You can even put them grease fitting to grease fitting, and you would actually be able to see this one needs just a little bit more. I mean, we are practically there. Let me just measure it this way too, just to make sure that I am accurate. And I would think we are pretty much there. Let me back it off just a little bit because it looks like I might have gone too far. And The only reason why I do this way, guys, is so I can get an approximate length. Don't think that this is going to be a substitution for an alignment, because it's not. All I'm doing is getting my suspension front end parts as close as I can, because I don't have an alignment rack here, and I have to drive this about 2 or 3 blocks down the road, and I don't want to destroy anything. Most people will just put this together and not care. I always measure, and if I can't do it like this on a bench where I'm pre-assembling my inner outer tie rods, like on most rack and pinions you're not able to do it this way, I will usually measure from the inner to the outer and try to get them the exact same length, about as close as I could from where the factory position was or where the car originally had the positioning in. So normally I'll take pre-measurements before either way, but just on this scenario these are so much easier because you could do it this way. Now that I got it fairly close, I'm just gonna go ahead and hand tighten the jam nut on there, just to kind of keep it in sync, and we're gonna go ahead and remove our protective layer on here. Now my brand that I like to use is Moog. It's not a paid sponsorship or anything, guys, just Moog makes really good heavy duty parts for this application. They come with Loctite already on them. You guys can see it's a blue Loctite. Preferably I've always used red on these, but now they're coming with blue, but the amount they give you, you can see it's fairly skimpy. So I also like to take my blue Loctite stick and I'll go ahead and I'll reapply a little bit more on here, simply because if this were to come off, there's nothing that's really gonna keep your wheel from going any which way it wants. So I definitely do not want to be liable for this coming off, so I give it a nice healthy dosing of it. Now that we got our assembly ready, we're gonna go ahead to the truck again and we're gonna reinstall this. Alright guys, now that I got my camera set up here, what we're going to do is go ahead and start threading our inner tie rod into our rack, or linkage I guess you could say, because not really a rack system here. And you want to be very careful here. You don't want to cross thread it or mess up your threads, so be very mindful of this. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and take my wrench here and just start spinning it on, trying to tighten it up. These, to be honest with you, there's no way to really torque them, so what I do is I just tighten them as much as I could, and I just use my Allen head here, or my channel lock adjustable wrench, whatever you want to call it, and now that you've hand threaded it, what you're going to do is grab your wrench and pretty much just adjust it to size to fit on here, and we're going to go ahead and tighten this up. Now I do use a pipe for a bit of leverage here. There's no real way to torque these on. I haven't really ran into a tool that can get these on there successfully aside from this method. So unfortunately there is no torquing this. It's just tighten it until she's good and tight, I guess is the best way to put it. So I'm good right there, and that is nice and tight now, and the remainder of it will also be held on with that Loctite that we installed on the threading. So now that we got that snugged up and tight, we're going to go ahead and get the camera zoomed out and show you the other end of it. Now that we went ahead and we got our inner tie rod tightened up, what we're going to do is go ahead and take our outer and we're going to line it up with our knuckle. Sometimes this can be a little painstaking because this joint is pretty stiff, but I just try to insert it in there and then very carefully just use the actual knuckle to release that tension. And then we're going to take our new castellated nut that came in the box with it, and we're going to go ahead and install it on there. These, you got to basically line it up accordingly to where the end of it is. So on this one in particular, I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. I just use my impact, and we're just going to run it down a little more until we line up our nut. Now our nut is lined up really good right there. I'm going to go ahead and grab our cotter pin and get our cotter pin installed. Now that the nut has already been tightened and we're all lined up, what I like to do is take my cotter pin, and these aren't actually too bad. What I like to do is go ahead and bend them upward. Now, some people may think I'm crazy doing it by hand, but guys, I've been doing this for years. My fingers are pretty much used to this stuff. I take my top one and I bend it around, and then what I do is I'll take the bottom one and I'll just kind of loop it around kind of like a L, and I'll just use my wrench here, or I'm sorry, my side cutters, to go ahead and bend the tabs in, give it a nice tight fit. Now I don't like leaving my cotter pins very loose. You guys can see this one is not loose at all. It's actually pretty firm on there. So that's how I like to set it up. Other people may have difference of opinion, just how I do it. Now that we've gone ahead and everything is installed, depending on your ball joint, whatever you chose, if you do have a Zerk fitting, go ahead and grease it up. What I like to do is take my gun here and just go ahead and pump it filled with grease. You'll kind of see that boot rising in there and inflating. I go ahead until I see it's about to bellow out, so right about there. We actually did a little bit too much. You can see it's coming out of the designated port there. So our outer tie rod is greased up. Now our inner tie rod also has a grease point. Let me go ahead and try to show you guys that part of it, because this one is a little bit more difficult to show. So now that the camera is lined up there, what you're going to want to do is basically come in from the bottom, and you will see there is a Zerk fitting right here as well. And we're going to go ahead and pump it up with grease. Now for those of you wondering what I'm using to grease this up, I actually have a electric Milwaukee gun that I'm using with grease. And that's what I basically use to fill them up. Now this one I got just right, so we are all set. Once you grease your inner and your outer tie rod, guys, this job is pretty much all set and done for. And all you have to do is put the wheel on and send it down the road. Now the next step that you want to do, and I forgot to mention this in the previous clip, as you guys can see the tire is already on, but before you lubricate them, which you'll see in the next one, what you're going to want to do is make sure you come in here and just tighten up your jam nut. If you're going to be taking it to an alignment shop, you want to tighten this before you head down to the road, because this will cause your inner outer tie rod to basically separate. So make sure this is tightened up, guys. If you are in a shop and you have an alignment rack and you're only driving it a couple feet, you could probably leave them loose, but definitely do tighten them. I've always tightened them in every scenario, guys. Even if I had to drive 3 racks down or 3 bays down to do my alignment when I worked at the dealer, I always at least snug these up. But if you're going to be doing it yourself and taking it to a shop, make sure you tighten them on there really good. That way you can jam the tie rods together so they don't separate and cause any issues. Because if you don't, it will dislocate and you will lose steering control. So I just wanted to mention that, guys. So that's how easy it is to do an inner and outer tie rod on a Chevy 2500 heavy duty truck, guys. Quite simple. I really love this design. It's very simple, very unique, but also very heavy duty as well. I'll do this all day, every day versus a rack and pinion. As long as you follow some key steps to make sure that everything is done correctly, you should be good to go. One of the major key steps is making sure you have Loctite on the inner tie rod end. Depending on what company you go with, they may not have supplied the actual Loctite, so make sure you pick some up. Even if you have one that came supplied with Loctite, like our Moog ones that we used on this one, I still applied a little bit more just to be on the safe side, because if that were to come loose, there's nothing keeping that wheel from going wherever it wants. So a little bit of more Loctite is definitely useful in this scenario. So hopefully you guys found this video useful. Hopefully this video helps some of you out there if you guys are attempting to do this job. Please comment, like, and subscribe. It definitely helps the channel grow. And until the next repair, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll catch you on the next one.